Welcome to another Quantum Conversation, brought to you by AcousticHealth.com. I'm Loren Gailey, and I invite you to sit back as we enter the quantum realm, that space of the greater part of you. It is your connection to infinite possibilities, infinite potential, and infinite mastery. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are in this sacred space today, focusing on planetary peace. And this is a conversation today with Richard Lawrence of the Aetherius Society out of Europe. And he has worked closely with Dr. George King, and even author of the book, Awaken Your Inner Potential. And he's a beautiful teacher for us. And what we're going to learn today is some practices that help us raise the global consciousness and respond to crisis. Many light workers feel a need of the hour to use our collective energy to help the planet, to help bring peace on the planet. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Hello, Richard Lawrence. Thank you for being here.
Lauren, it's a real pleasure. Could I just quickly mention that book that you kindly referred to? That's Realize Your Inner Potential. It's by Dr. King, and I was honored to co-author it with him.
It is a beautiful book. It's got, I have a copy of it myself, and it's got practical applications for what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I think there's, some would think that this is all woo-woo, but this is real. This is real abilities that we have, and you've done great work on the planet to bring an awareness of how we can each tap into this inner potential that we have. So thank you. Thank you for sharing on that.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. I'm glad you said that, actually, because I think the word real is so important in this, because so many spiritual movements through the ages and even world religions and so on have been founded on belief, have been founded on faith. And those two things are important, but I think a greater thing than either of those is experience. Something you act. This is what really caused me to write the first book I ever wrote, which was Unlock Your Psychic Powers, 30 years ago, believe it or not. It's still in print now. And I wrote that because I realized that, you can argue about these things. You can do, I was doing lots of media interviews. You can debate them, and you can get scientists in the studio and tests and all the rest of it. But in the end, it doesn't matter. The only thing that really matters is the individual experience. And when you have an experience of healing or an experience of clairvoyance or psychic vision, which is definite, which is not your imagination, a real experience, you feel it, you see it, then you know, and other people can debate all they like to kingdom come, but you at that point know that this is not a theory, it's not an idea, it's a fact, because you've experienced it.
Yes, and our experience is what makes it our truth. And
Yes.
we, you've got in our chat line here on the Zoom audience, and on the link on this webpage where people are watching this, is a special offer to a class that was done that showed how this really does work and how we could experience these practices as fact. And it was beautiful because people were able to sense a shift from these practices. And it really goes deep into ways that people can even further unlock their psychic potential and their psychic gifts. So thank you for that. We'll talk more about that later, because our discussion today is based on something that was done in that class, and that was using our energy to send it to other people, and then to send it to the planet. And here we are, it's amazing that we're in the 2020, well, what do you call this decade, in the 20s of the year 2000?
Yes.
In the 20s, we're in 2022, almost 2023.
Yeah.
But here we are, and we would think that all the work that the light workers have been doing, we'd be beyond what we're seeing in the external world. So we felt that it was a very important practice today to do something for planetary peace.
Yeah.
Can you expand on the need of the hour and what your idea is of how this would affect peace on our planet?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think it's any secret to anybody that the world is in an absolute crisis at many levels. I mean, we have wars, we have ecological dangers. I don't need to list it. Everybody kind of is aware of that. I think the one thing that isn't really being tried, certainly by, as it were, the establishment, as we might call it here, or the system, or whatever word you call it, politicians, governments, officialdom, even the educational structures and the media, the mainstream media. What isn't being really tried is the spiritual solutions. And this is the positive. There are solutions. But I mean, time is running out and we're going to have to take action. What I would say, just to get started, is please don't underestimate what you can do, because I think a lot of people do. I mean, I've done TV shows over here in Britain where we've done healing and we've had good healers on. I mean, not just from the Aetherius Society, other healers. This is a wonderful thing. Lots of people are doing this, but they don't believe they could make a difference, some of them anyway, in the Ukraine war or in another situation in the Middle East or a great disastrous earthquake in another part of the world. They think it has to be one-on-one, and it works one-on-one. And as you rightly say, in the webinar, as you say, people, in that, we did some one-on-one healing with a few people, and we had some results there and then in that class, and people can check that out for themselves. And I'm only saying that because the people who attended said they were results. If you can do that, you can extend that to a global situation. If you can send healing to your aunt in Mississippi or wherever, or Lancashire in Britain, or wherever it might be, from wherever you are, and it works, and it can be sensed, and it can be felt, and people get better. And by the way, this doesn't replace any other form of medicine you may choose to use. It's not an alternative, it's an additional thing. And it really works. And I've experienced it, and numerous others have experienced it. If that can take place, then it can take place at a global level. And I just think people don't feel empowered, really, that they can make a difference, and they really can. Everyone can send out positive spiritual energy. And once you've experienced that, once you've tried some of the exercises in that webinar, or we can do some in this if you want. Once you find, okay, this isn't somebody, I mean, it all started for me at university when I went to a lecture and I was told, you can heal people. All you have to do is raise the hands like this. This is what I was taught in this lecture. Close your eyes, visualize white light, white because it contains all the colors of the spectrum, and just visualize white light flowing through you. And then most importantly, feel love and compassion for whoever you're sending the energy to. You can make a difference. And that night after the lecture, I went back to my room at the university as a student and tried it. I thought I'll send energy to a tramp I'd seen earlier in the day, raised my hands, visualize, I think in America you'd say a bum, I don't know, but a poor person who was homeless and so on. And I just sent them energy. But that's one thing that was, something I was really experimenting with at that point. But then I felt this energy. Now, I'm not going to say this will happen to everybody. It sooner or later it will. May not happen immediately. In my particular case, I was perhaps in perfect conditions. I gave it a good try, and I could feel the energy flowing through me, so much so, as a matter of fact, that it kind of worried me. I was about 18 then, and I, hadn't been warned that this energy was going to keep coursing through your body to a sense that you can sense, not imagination, not some little itch that you might have, real flowing rivulets of energy. And I didn't really know what it was at that point. And so I couldn't argue with that. That was why I come back to experience. Other people feel heat in the palms of their hands. Other people feel a cold chill in their spine. There are different ways, and other people have psychic vision and different experiences. The important thing, though, is that it works. Now, if we can do that, then we can raise our hands and send this energy to the peoples. If, say, we were talking about the Ukraine conflict, I would say the peoples on both sides, whether they be Russian, whether they be Ukrainian, we don't engage. I suggest to spiritual workers that they don't engage in the politics, take sides, or anything like that. Just uncondition the love, as it were, without any preconceptions, and allow it to flow through you. And it will. And it will be really powerful. It'll be very powerful at the moment, by the way, because it's a particularly powerful period. In the Aetheric Society, that's our belief, because we're believers in help from above, help from other worlds. That's another topic. And we believe right now, great help is being given. So, and that's up till December the 10th. So it's a very powerful period to try this and just allow this energy to flow through you.
That is wonderful. Thank you. So it brings up some questions. And the first is, I want to go back to what you were saying about December 10th.
Yes,
What's
I thought that
going
might
on?
catch you.
Yeah. So
Well,
what's happening? Is there a
yeah,
window?
I mean, this isn't, by the way, whether you accept what I'm going to say now or not, doesn't alter the fact that you can send healing at any given time of the year, any day of the year, any minute of the year. And it's something we can do. But in the Aetheric Society, we believe in a thing called a spiritual push. And this is something that Dr. George King, when he was like, now, for people who have never heard of him, he was a master of yoga. I was lucky to follow him and become actually a very close friend of his as well, and co-author a couple of books with him and spend a lot of time with him. And he would receive communications. He was a medium, among other things, from other worlds. And these communications would tell him, give him dates, particular dates into the future in our calendar, when efforts such as healing, such as prayer, such as service, regardless of whether people know of this or even believe in it, doesn't make any difference at all, when their efforts will be enhanced. And those are called spiritual pushes. And there's one which runs from November the 4th to December the 10th. And we're in that right now. But as I say, that is regardless. I mean, there are many things you can do to make your efforts more potent. You can go to that's times I'm talking about there, and there are energy flows at certain times, and astrologers will look at that as well. But there's also places. You know, I mean, I'm just looking at where you are. I don't know if that's a screen or if you're really there, but it looks beautiful. And there are lovely locations. People, I mean, actually, I'm in the back room in a temple here. It's in the very busy city of London, but it's a very holy place with very powerful energies in it, because people come here and they only do spiritual things here. So that energy is imbued. But if you're at home, you can create a space in your home which becomes your little temple, really. It might just be the corner of a room. It depends how much space. If you're lucky enough, it can be a whole room. It depends what you've got. And it's, you know, be ideal if that happened to be facing east. But if not, you know, we just make the best we can. And you can put some objects there that to you have a holy significance, such as holy rocks from a particular mountain, or a particular stone, which is of significance, and a power stone, or perhaps a little statue of the Lord Buddha, or whatever, a picture of Jesus, whatever it is that you revere, you know, Sri Krishna, whatever, and you can place it there. And when you do the practices we're talking about here, sending energy to the world, healing others, you always go to that little corner of the room or whatever space you've got. And that space will then start to gain power. It'll start to gain energy. And you'll find some evenings, perhaps you feel tired out, you've had a busy day, maybe at the office, or maybe looking after your children or whatever, and you're depleted, you don't feel very inspired, but you go to that corner and you're lifted up by that corner because you've only used it for that purpose. You can do the same with clothing. You can have some clothing that you only wear to do yoga or spiritual practices and nothing else. You don't go for a walk in it. You don't go anywhere in it. Unless you're doing spiritual practices while you're walking, you just have it for that purpose. And again, you put those clothes on, immediately you feel uplifted. Now, those clothes could be, they're obviously going to be clean. They might be very simple clothes. They might be a robe. They might just be a white shirt and some white trousers. That's your choice. But they will gain these are little things you can do to make your prayer output or your healing output, whatever you want to call it, more powerful.
Yes, beautiful. I think that many have that altar space and would be aware that as we do this, it's actually, would we call it like a vortex, an energy vortex or a portal to higher realms, and beings will be there assisting us. And so this brings up the next question around energy, spiritual energy. Can you give us a definition of spiritual energy? Oftentimes we talk about doing the energy work. And this is what we're talking about, is removing density within our body to allow a higher frequency to come in. But what is your definition through working with Dr. George King about spiritual energy?
Actually, I go with everything you've said there. I like the words you've used and the whole description there. Spiritual energy, though, because Dr. King was an extremely practical person. He was interested in solutions. He was interested in what we could actually do, much more than he was interested in, say, moral philosophy. I mean, he could talk at length on moral philosophy. He could talk on yoga philosophy. He had a brilliant logical mind. But what really interested him was, what can people do? What can ordinary people do? What can busy people do? Not people who are in ashrams, maybe in the Himalayas, but people who have a sort of busy life of one kind or another, maybe in a Western country, maybe in a city. What can they do? So he drew on to answer your question, the yogic concept of prana, which is, I'm sure people are familiar, or it's the same thing really as qi in the qigong and the oriental approach. It's that natural universal supply of energy, which is limitless, which never runs out, which we can draw on. Now, the ultimate source for that energy, as far as we are concerned, is the sun. It comes from and through the sun, which is why those people who worship the sun were not primitive at all, as missionaries would like to say. They were actually very, very wise. The sun is really the nearest thing to God, if you like, that we will ever feel on our skins, and that's the rays of the sun. And so everything in this solar system, Dr. King used to say, and some of those who spoke through him. I mean, I'd like to come back to your point about opening portals to higher realms and guides, if you like. That's something I'm very, very interested in and I've had a lot of experience of. But it's something we may come back to. But in terms of the energy, that's something we can all do in a standalone way. We don't require a guide. We don't require an angel. They are more than welcome. And in fact, we'd be honored to have their help. But we can stand on our own 2 feet in that regard. We can draw that energy. And the main tool we have at our disposal is 1 or 2 of them. And I teach them in the webinar that you mentioned, are breathing. That's one way to draw prana to you. It's not the oxygen, it's the natural universal life forces, the energies carried on the air, if you like, on the breath. And another key way to draw it to you is visualization. Very, very important. Simple, true visualization too, because you can get some teachers I know who and I'm not sort of disrespecting anyone, but they can teach very complicated visualizations, which are based on ideas, not necessarily bad ideas, but just ideas. But when you want to contact a real force, prana, chi, the universal life force, it should be based on actuality, on reality, on fact. Keep coming back to that. And so your visualization, I mentioned earlier, white light, because white contains all the colors of the spectrum. If you're giving healing, for example, to someone who is extremely hyper, has anxiety, is very nervous, what they might need in terms of color is blue light, or if you like, a mid-spectrum green light. If on the other hand you have someone very lethargic, very phlegmatic, very unmotivated, they might need in their aura a brighter color than that, a different color than that. But when you visualize white light, you can draw the prana and the color of that prana that you actually need.
And the light knows what to do and where to go. The energy knows what to do. We don't need to direct it, do we? Or
that's a good point. I take your point, not in sort of minute detail. No, we don't. But we do need to make, a lot of people talk about intention, don't they now? And intention does work. It's without, again, any disrespect. I would like to be a bit stronger than that. Intention, they say the road to hell was paved with good intention. So it depends how you take that word, but it's a good thing. But I would almost say demand. You're almost creating a demand for that energy. In other words, you're being really positive about it. You're visualizing it. You are doing it with humility. Now, if you are, as I am, a believer in God, but you might use a different word. You might use the word Brahma, which is just as good, might even be better. These are just words. Or divine creator, not limited to male or female gender, or even neither male or female gender. Above all of this, it's not a person. But if you are a believer in that, and I think it's logical myself to believe in that, then you can say some kind of a prayer, but you don't have to. That's a personal choice. If you wish to say a prayer, I would say a prayer. Then you would say, make a request with a certain reverence and humility, because humility and reverence are energies themselves. It's not about sort of humbling yourself for the sake of it or anything like that. It's having a certain reverence for a greater force. And this draws it to you, and you can test it. All these things you can test. If, on the other hand, you're a person who perhaps really doesn't like anything that smacks of religion or that type of thing, you don't have to do a prayer at all. You don't even have to believe in God at all. To channel this energy, you just visualize it and you make, as it were, a mental demand for the energy to flow through you. But I would suggest you do it with a certain humility, because that works far better than, if you like, a bit of arrogance. That will work against the flow of energy.
very interesting. And I've talked to so many people, and I've seen people, and even myself, driving down the highway, like in the beginning of my journey and awakening, I guess you could call it, just a need, an urge to be humble and to just hold a hand up and just send white light or golden light out through the hand to traffic on the other side of the highway, and doing it without any need for an outcome,
Yeah.
without any need to be aware of an outcome, just to feel what was going
Yes.
on there. And we can take this one step further. When we do what you were mentioning, to chemtrails, the big long puffs of smoke from planes, you can go
Yes.
into what those are, but we can literally do that and send that energy to a chemtrail or a cloud, and we can see what happens. That is fact. right there. And
Mm-hmm.
even if we're on an airplane and the captain comes on to say, stewardesses, flight attendants, take your jump seats, we're going to go into some turbulence. How many stories have we heard of people centering themselves and staying calm, or maybe even being in a calm place with the spiritual energy, and there's no turbulence? This
That's very
is the
true.
fact that,
That is a fact. It is a fact. Yes, you affect your whole environment. And this is underestimated because thoughts are things. And, I don't suppose there's anybody listening to this who hasn't at one time or another picked up someone's thought.
mm,
Or if not their thought, their general mood or feeling without being told.
yeah,
Why? Because it's vibration, because it travels through the ethers and you can detect it. It's not body language. You might do it on the telephone without any visual. But you pick it up, and it happens all the time. And people say, oh, I picked up your thought without, well, okay, what are you saying there? I mean, people who don't believe in psychic things will say, I picked up your thought. I like the vibe of this place. This is psychic terminology. People will say, oh, you're getting calmer. If you said, oh, you're a Hindu, they say, oh, no, 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 no. But they know because instinctively these things are real. They're facts. They really happen. Karma is an extremely important thing, a really important force. It's not as a lot of people think, a sort of out to get you sort of punishment. It's actually there to help us. Doesn't always maybe seem like it. But the good news, this is one thing Dr. King really stressed. We can change our karma. We can change world karma. And if you think about it, if everybody just sits back, think, I can't do anything about, I'm mentioning the Ukraine conflict, but there could be many other things. It's an example that is happening right now as we're talking. And I'll say on both sides, whatever your politics, people are dying, people are suffering. We can all sit back and say, well, nothing I can do about that. You can't do anything about that. And so many people think that, they study the news, but that doesn't necessarily, if they get gloomy about the news, that won't help. If everybody, though, did something, if everybody, or let's not say everybody, but a decent number of people did something, actually one person can make a difference on their own. And just every day for 5 minutes, send love energy in the way I've described, visualizing white light with your hands raised, visualizing the white light coming down through the head, down the arms, out through the psychic centers in the palms. If you really want to do it really well, you take off, like I have a ring there, you take it off, if you can take it off. Some people can't really take their rings off, and you take off a watch. So there's nothing to obstruct the flow, no metal which can attract energy. This is the practicality of Dr. George King. And you just hold your palms up and you close the eyes and you visualize the white light. And then you either say your prayer or you make your humble demand for white light to flow. And then you just feel the love, the compassion. And very importantly, while you're doing it, you visualize peace. You don't visualize the conflict, the suffering. You visualize peace. You visualize healing, you visualize well-being, you visualize harmony. So that's the energy then that you're sending out. If you did that for 5 minutes, 2 things will happen. One, positive energy will go out. Now, as you rightly said when you gave your example on the other side of the road, sending healing, you don't attach to the outcome. There's no point in it because you won't know. You won't know what good you've done, actually, but you might save someone's life. That day, that 5 minutes could be the lifesaver for someone. Quite probably, not just vaguely. And that's just based on what we know of healing and what it can do and what it has done. So, that's a positive. The other positive is you're changing world karma because all of us are a cell in the whole of the planetary race, if you like. And so a light is lit within that body, that universal one body. A light is lit, which radiates even dimly, but a bit all the way through that whole, and that lifts the karma of humanity. And that change of karma also, as well as the energy, must have an effect on the war in Ukraine.
Beautiful. I know there's many in our group watching who are doing this, and that
Good.
shows us the importance of why we're actually here on the planet and why we
Mm.
chose to incarnate. Because we said, oh my goodness, all we have to do is radiate love. We can do this. We've got
Yes, we
it.
can.
And I just want to share, I don't know if you can hear, Zoom has filters that filter out the microphones, but I have a couple of toucans outside my window after we were doing this, and they have been chirping and singing with us all along. So they
Beautiful.
are supporting us as well. It's really beautiful.
Yes.
We're going to go into an exercise for global peace, global
Right.
healing for planetary peace.
Yes.
But as we do that, before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about opening portals and what's happening there. As we were discussing creating the vortex in our home or in a corner of our home or even outside, altars, whatever we want to call it, these these are assisted by higher beings in higher realms, and it's our input in that energy that is it matched by higher beings or our guides and angels, and it attracts those beings, those higher realms, to come and even further energize these altars? Is that what
Yeah.
is
Can I should mention that I've been involved in channeling for 30 years. So I've had many contacts with the wonderful people on higher realms, men and women, on different realms. So what I'm saying to you now is metaphysical teaching, but it's also based on experience again of what I've received and what I've been told by them.
well,
Sorry,
can
interrupting.
I want to interject and ask how you decipher or you discern that voice? How would you recognize? I mean, as we're all developing these skills, I mean, like I've personally heard, we are this, and
Mhm.
I doubt it. What do you do, or what would you recommend for someone who begins to go down this route and asks to hear or asks for the guidance from their guides? How do you understand who's talking to you or what that is?
It's a massive, massive, fascinating topic, this. And I would say that when I started doing it in the early stages, I did make some mistakes. And I was helped by Dr. George King himself. And I then practiced in the light of that for 25 years before I published a book on this topic. And in that book, it's called God's Guides and Guardian Angels. And in that book, I give examples of contacts, which I absolutely know, because when you made a mistake, you want to get it right. I learned a lot from that. And as I say, I could talk at length, but to sort of get to your question, you say, you doubt it. I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way, let me say. I do think I've been asked many times, and I've taught people psychic development, both one-to-one and in large groups, and even up to 1,000 people in a hall. So it's something that I have never done, is to teach people channeling per se, give guidelines on it, because it is easy to go wrong. And, I'm very careful with myself, and I test myself, and I get absolute, undeniable third-party proof, as it were. In other words, I can check things against sources, I can check names, I can check dates, I could give you examples, but I have been extremely cautious. So I don't think it's a bad thing to, as it were, question, to doubt. And in some ways, you get a message. Now, for a lot of people, you might be driving a car, you might be walking down a road, and then a thought pops into your head, which is really helpful. I mean, and you can test it. I mean, the thought might be, go back to your house now. When I used to do a lot of radio phone-ins in the UK, and this was mainstream radio stations, I used to get incredible cases from people who weren't psychic, they told me, at all. It wasn't their field, but they'd had these experiences. So one was, it was a number of years ago, but a woman who had this really strong feeling to go and visit her parents. And, she didn't know why. It wasn't that sensible. It was a very wintry night, and she could easily have gone the next day. But she was such a strong impression that she went. Now, it was a safe thing to do, and she did. And she saw her father. And that night, she told me on this radio show, her father passed on. Now, if she'd left, and he wasn't known to be dying. Now, if she'd left it to the next day, she wouldn't have been there with him. So, I mean, it wasn't small to her, but it's relatively small in the scheme of, humanity. But it's a real thing where she listened, and it was safe to listen. So sometimes I say you're walking down a road, a thought comes in. You don't know where it comes from. It might be a guide. It might be your own higher self, your own intuition. And if it's, you can test it. Don't do something that's dangerous. Don't do something that's illegal. But if it's like, turn right at the next turning, and you've got time, and why not? And you turn right, and there you bump into someone you've been looking for years. And you wouldn't have done if you hadn't turned right. You think, right, whatever I had there, I don't know what it was, but it was correct. That was guidance of some kind. Now, to go from that stage to telling the difference between a guide, an angel, whatever you wish to call it, and your own higher self does take a lot of training. And what I'd say is very often, it doesn't really matter. You don't actually have to know. I don't always know. I haven't got time to try and find out. And is it a good thought? Is it a helpful thought? That's all that really matters, wherever it comes from. This is happening all the time to artists, composers. They don't realize how much they're channeling, a lot of them. And in a way, it doesn't matter. And often the
rest
guides,
of us, right?
That's true. And often the guides don't mind anyway. They're not, if they're advanced guides, they won't mind at all. In fact, I've found when you get, the more advanced the guide is, the less interested he or she is in telling you their name, who they are, what they did, or where they come from. They don't really seem interested or particularly wanting to pass that on quite often when they're more advanced. When you're getting a less advanced one, and when I went through this program and I wrote this book, God's Guides and Guardian Angels, I was having a lot of writers, some of them famous writers, giving me messages which were, I couldn't have done. Some of their names I hadn't heard of until afterwards, which is interesting to me. I realized somebody could come along and say to me, look, I don't believe a word of this. You could have made all that up. And that's fine. It doesn't matter, because I know, just like the healing, when you do the healing, somebody else can disbelieve it. Now, if you really, though, want to go and really tie down, is this a guide? Is this my own higher self? Then you need to develop a psychic ability, and you'll have to work hard to do that reliably. And so in my case, the main psychic ability that I've developed is clairaudience, which is psychic hearing. And it's not an audible sound, but if I get a message, just to give an extreme example, let's say from John Lennon, let's just throw out a famous name. If I did get that, it would come with the strong Liverpudlian accent of John Lennon, because I would start to hear that in my mind, not physically hear it. Or if it was Winston Churchill, I'd hear that in my mind. At the same time, I wouldn't just get a thought popping in my head. I would get a sound, a mind sound, if you like, as well. And this is how you tell the difference between your own intuition and an outside guide. If you want to go, that's one of the best ways, I would say. There are other ways, but I would say clairaudience would be something to really develop, but it does take time. You've got to be careful, and it can be dangerous. I'm going to say that. It's no good saying, I want to be responsible about this, because you can get people who can get deluded, who think they're hearing messages and they aren't. And this can be quite problematic. It can lead to mental health issues for them. So I'm saying that in a compassionate way. That's why I come back to your first point. Keep your doubt, keep your questioning. If you don't know, it doesn't matter. Put it on a shelf, leave it there. And then if you decide to really go for it, and I told you, it took me 25 years before I was willing to publish a book on this, then you can learn and you can tell the difference. Sorry, that was a very long answer to your question.
Oh, but I love it. It's really valuable. So thank you for taking the time to explain it. We're going to go back to opening portals. Before we get there, though, ringing in the ears, tones, frequencies, those are frequencies. Many have reported, in the first time it ever happened to me, oh my goodness, it was in like 1998, maybe 1997. And it was very disconcerting to me. It was a sound that started in this ear and went across my head to the other ear. And I kind of freaked out. And I sat down and just did some yoga poses. I didn't know what
Yeah,
else to do.
good idea, actually. Yeah,
Something is going on there. And
yes, definitely.
so, tinnitus, is it tinnitus or is it frequencies? Is it energy? Is it information? Is it our guides?
That's a very good, you see, I think that's a very balanced approach that you've just given there. Is it tinnitus or is it guides? I think that's good. Because that it's someone who jumps to conclusions. You've got to be very careful in psychic development. As I say, I made some mistakes. I wasn't mistaken about having guides. I was mistaken about who they were, and I was jumping to conclusions. And that's why I learned to be really, really, really careful and test everything and not do anything till I absolutely knew with definite proof, as far as I was concerned, before I said this is something. Now, when you start to hear sounds in the ears, which you can do, and by the way, and let's be really clear about this, you have to develop psychic abilities to become enlightened. Now, that I know is controversial, and I know there are some old school yoga practitioners who will disagree with that. But I have to say they're wrong, in my opinion. And it's not an opinion. I'm sure they're wrong. Now, it doesn't mean everyone's got to go out and become a practicing psychic, not at all. But in one way or another, you'll have psychic events along the way, along the journey, along the road to enlightenment. If you've got someone, and there are people, some of them very well-known people, professing to be enlightened, who have never experienced, in one way or another, psychic development, they have settled for something below enlightenment. It might be a good thing. It might be a peaceful thing. It might be a helpful thing to many people through life, but it's not true enlightenment, because things like the ringing in the ears that you mentioned there will happen. Actually, even in the old yoga schools, I mentioned them, even in those schools, though, they talked about the sounds in the ears. They talked about the light in the head, the things, and these are psychic things. So one way or another, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a clairaudient or a medium, or, I would suggest everyone could be a healer, but that, there are different ways of doing it. But one way or another, you will experience these things along the way. These things aren't the goal. The goal is not to become psychic. The goal is to help humanity and become enlightened. It's just something that happens along the way. And so I would say that sound you were hearing was connected to the heart center or heart chakra. And it's that psychic center, when it starts to awaken, that you start to hear sounds in the ears.
Okay.
That would be I wouldn't be dogmatic, but that would be my suggestion.
Well, that resonates very deeply because I look at my life and how my life changed from them. I was doing yoga at the time. It was a part of my awakening. And so really very fascinating. And so now it gets to a point where I tune in very clearly when that happens. And it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes it happens more than others. It's very interesting, but it's just part of the journey. And we're all going through it.
We
And
are.
it's more awareness for each of us to have. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Agree.
Okay, we
Yeah.
are going to get to our global healing for planetary
Yes.
peace, but let's go back to opening portals because I interjected
Okay.
there.
Well, opening portals, I mean, that's a phrase I can relate to. I've never used that phrase, but it sounds a good one to me. It's where you're starting, I'm taking it that you mean getting a connection with a higher realm.
Yes.
And from what I've been told by people on higher realms, they are very keen to help us, which is a wonderful thing, really. It's that they look at the situation on this physical realm, which is a very lowly realm, an extremely basic realm, and not a very spiritual one. Let's face it, quite a wicked one, really, overall. And you could look at it, and we won't go into all the negatives, but one could do with the politicians and the
We
money
could
and the,
call it hell,
yeah.
right? Hell is on.
And yet, the great thing about this realm is in the same century as you had Hitler, you had Gandhi.
Mm,
So you have the light workers such as your good self and the people who tune into your shows. You have spiritual people as well in the mix, unlike even lower realms than this, where you don't so much. I mean, the light always gets in somehow, somewhere, but it does. Here, it's a very mixed bag. It's all on this realm are people this physical realm from all the realms, the worst and the highest. But what I found from, as you call it, opening the portals and receiving information, knowledge from higher realms, if you like, is that they have great respect for light workers here. They appreciate that where they are, and I'm talking about the highest realms, the conditions are very conducive for them. I mean, there isn't, if you get to the highest realms, there's no one who disagrees with light being sent. There's no one who actually, on the highest realms, who actually believes that politics is the answer or that finance is the answer. They have very little interest in finance unless it's to help humanity in some way. And they aren't fooled. And so they can see, not from theory or philosophy, but from actuality, from what they can actually experience, the power of the light. But they know that it's much more difficult here because the people who are listening to us now, I don't know, obviously, their personal situations, but one way or another, wherever they go, they're going to come across people who won't accept the sort of conversation we're having now at all. And they'll think it's all nonsense. And so they're fighting a spoken or unspoken barrage of disbelief designed to detune us. And this is understood by higher guides. They recognize that. They don't have that there. We have it here. They deserve to be there, but they also know how difficult it is here. So they really want to help. So when somebody starts healing, when somebody starts praying, they might open up a portal to some higher source who actually wants to help them. And you might know this and you might not know this. You might be praying away and suddenly you feel a great burst of energy flowing through you with great intensity. And again, you actually, I would advise you not to try and find out at that point what that is, because just let it flow, just go with it. But it could be a particular guide or even group of guides where they are helping you. I mean, you might be doing some form of healing prayer and visualization. They might be a group of Tibetan lamas on a higher realm chanting a sacred mantra and directing their energy through you, because you have manipulated karma, not manipulated people, but manipulated your karma so that you can get that help, so you can deserve that help, and they can then use you, and they want to use you, because I said earlier, they appreciate how really difficult it is sometimes for light workers in this, what you called it, a hell, but this very backward, extremely materialistic, selfish, world on the whole, with great exceptions, but not enough.
You know, so inspiring, these words, because it empowers us to never give up, to never feel that we're alone, to never have a pity party. You know, I call
Yeah,
it hell in jest. But when I was a little girl and a teenager, I looked around at the world and I said, the hell is living on Earth. If people
yeah.
can treat each other this way and
Mm.
all of it. And so that really led me to the spiritual path of bringing heaven to earth, heaven on earth with the spiritual light.
Yeah.
And so are we all healers? Yes, we can
Yes.
all heal.
Yes. In fact, Dr. King's book on this topic, which is one of the first things I ever helped him with. I was only 23 when he brought this book out. It's called You Too Can Heal. And strangely enough, when he brought that book out, and it's still available now at Amazon and elsewhere, it wasn't believed. And the people who didn't believe it, because I had only just really got to know him, and I was a school teacher just out of university and a music teacher, but he sort of made me his publicity officer, even though I wasn't employed yet. I was employed later by him. And so my first project was this book, You Too Can Heal. So I went along to a lot of the long-standing healing organizations in Britain. And these were places like the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, I think still going now, and the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain and others. And they didn't believe it. And they said to me, no, 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 not anyone. This is a gift. You either have this gift or you don't. You can't just teach people in general to heal. They have to, have an angel at the foot of the bed, or they have to be tapped on the shoulder, or they have to have some guide there. They can't just do this. And I said, well, I'm sorry, is the whole point of this, is that they can. Now, that those same organizations that, by the way, are teaching that anyone can heal, which is great, which is wonderful, but they weren't then. And Reiki healing, as we now know it, which is everywhere, it was a very rare thing. No one had heard of it over here at that time, hardly. But if they had, it was little known. So this is a massive change. But anyway, that's a long answer to your question. Anyone, yes, can heal, providing there is a provider, actually, they have compassion. But there again, everyone has compassion. If they don't feel it all the time, it can be contacted.
And I love how you say that, because I've said this a lot. I think every human heart has compassion. I think every human heart has integrity in it, and every human heart knows right from wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to always eternally be optimistic for that viewpoint.
Well, I think that's good. And Dr. King he was to me, incredible faith in human potential. And that's why the book is called Realize Your Inner Potential. Everyone can. And I've been doing this full time for 44 years, Lauren, now.
Thank
Since
you.
I stopped, teaching and it certainly wasn't a career for you to do for the money. Let's put it that way. But who cares? It's a great privilege. And I have had people, and one thing that more than one person has said to me, they've said, look, I can see what you're saying, and I believe what you're saying. In fact, I know it's true because I've had various experiences, and I'd like to get involved myself in doing this work, but I don't really want to. That's, quite an honest thing to say, really. Much as I believe in this and I think it's good, I actually want to, whatever, go and earn some money and go and do this and do whatever. And such a person is quite honest. And I've said to them, look, if that's your only problem, actually, you don't have a problem, because we all have a higher self, and the higher self does want to. I'll never forget some words that Dr. King spoke, which I put in when I wrote his biography quite recently, The King Who Came to Earth, it's called. I read these words that he'd written and spoken about his youth before he founded the Aetheric Society. He was young man. He was 20 at the outbreak of the Second World War. And he was quite skilled as a sportsman in martial skills, such as in those days, in the schools, it would be boxing, it would be rifle shooting, not killing birds, but killing clay pigeons, or not killing them, but, shooting at them. And he was quite skilled. He liked all that. So to him, being called up to the army he wasn't frightened of it. In fact, it was quite exciting, really. It was an adventure, he thought. But inside him, a voice was saying to him, "Thou shalt not kill." And when he spoke about this, he said, "I let that part win," which I find to be beautiful words. I let that part win. That part which was saying to him, that part of himself that was saying, "Thou shalt not kill," he let that part win. And he didn't go and fight. He did go out and pray. He did join the fire service, in the very dangerous blitz in London, and go into danger and drive ambulances into burning cities. And so he didn't avoid it, but he didn't enter into warfare. But the key words being, "I let that part win." And so anyone who's out there thinking, "Look, this all makes sense to me, but I don't think it's for me. I don't really want it." There's a part of you that does. There's a part of you that wants enlightenment, wants spirituality, wants to heal, as you say, has compassion. And you've got to let that part win.
Yes, beautiful words. And it brings to mind, we offer hypnosis sessions that help people connect to the higher self. And when someone hears the voice of their higher self, you cannot go back. That is a voice you will always remember and connect into always. And so that's really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. And I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed that start on the path of Reiki or energy healing, spiritual energy, let's call that as the healing effect that we're talking about. They report beings left and right. Beings come in, and just as you described it, at first it could just be an energy in the room. Some will even see a little angel sitting on the shoulder of their client, or a larger being. Yeah. So doesn't it make sense that us each individually doing spiritual healing, let's begin with the planet. We're going to get there in just a moment. But that is a step on the spiritual path. That is the step on the path of ascension. That is a step in your evolution to become psychic and bring on your skills. It's a step. I mean, I just wouldn't be, myself personally, I was really, really interested. More than interested, I was almost not quite obsessed, but extremely absorbed in psychic development for a whole period of my life, including out-of-body experiences, remembering past lives. I devoted like a year to just trying to remember past lives. I devoted another year to trying to do out-of-body practices and getting out at will, not just when you suddenly float up, as some people meant in millions of experience, actually, as they go to sleep or something, but really doing it. So, I went into it lock, stock and barrel, as they say over here. I really was, going for it. Now, you don't have to do that and at all. It's quite possible I went too far in a way, because I was focusing a lot on that rather than other forms of spiritual development. But then I wrote the book, Unlock Your Psychic Powers, and then, Realize Your Inner Potential, that book, which was the culmination really of the spiritual development books I've been writing with Dr. King. That was by far superior. That's a book that contains over 40 superb practices, which will, in a different way than you've described, lead to you contacting your higher self. When you start to open the higher chakras, then you will have a deeper contact with your higher self, and you'll know it. You'll start to feel it, and then you'll go to another stage where you'll start to know it, which is an even greater stage, really. And this is an evolutionary thing. So yes, these things you've mentioned, the angel on the shoulder and all that, those things can come along the way. What I wouldn't like to do is be dogmatic and say everyone has to
see angels on the shoulder, or everyone has to be clairaudient. It's going to be different. But what I would say, in one form or another, you are going to have psychic development. And if you have a teacher who has not had and doesn't mention at all any form of psychic development, you can know that they're not enlightened, because they will know about it in some form before they can get, as it were, move that aside. Because as you develop, a lot of flotsam, as we say, a lot of things come to the surface, and I'm sure people have experienced that, and you have to start to detach from those and move on and have clear water. Let the tide sweep it away, and you've got clear water, and then you dive deep. And that will start to happen. And one of the things you start to clear away as you develop are some of the psychic abilities you've learned. You don't need those anymore, some of them. Others you'll keep. But it's part of the stepping stones to get you where you're really going. And one thing that I would absolutely stress, that whatever else you develop, the most valuable thing to you is going to be your intuition. Because with that's not dependent on a guide. That's within yourself. That's your contact with your own higher self. Because without that, you can go wrong. And that's how I made my mistakes at the beginning of my development, by not listening to my intuition. You've got to always keep that flame burning, no matter whatever else you develop along the way.
And that is why spiritual teachers say, you know what you know within you, and develop that. That's really important. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. All right, so when we're in this sacred energy of our group, and for even all of those who will tune in and listen to the replay, let's do a group healing for planetary peace.
Right, yeah. Would you like me to lead that then, Lauren, or are you going to lead that?
Please, you.
All right, okay. So wherever you are then, if you'd like to join in with this, you could just be seated. I mean, you might wish to use a yoga asana, and that's fine if you do, such as Padma or whatever you choose. Otherwise, to sit seated on a hard back chair is perfectly good, as long as the spine is straight. You could even be standing up. I wouldn't do this lying down. Standing is excellent, or seated on a hard back chair. And the next thing to do is something you mentioned earlier, Lauren, which is become very still. So close the eyes. Have the head slightly back on the neck, and the shoulders relaxed. The palms facing downwards on the knees. As I mentioned earlier, remove any rings or watches you might be wearing. And now visualize. Now, this is a very important practice, because I mentioned the sun, and I'd like to mention the other very holy being. As a matter of fact, the holiest being any of us will ever touch, and that is the Mother Earth beneath our feet, a living being. That's a very important message that gets lost even in the ecological movement, which should be all about Mother Earth. So let's tune in just for a moment to Mother Earth. And let's now visualize coming up through the feet, from the earth, from the ground, or even if you're in a 10-story block, up through the floor. But it's coming from the Mother Earth, a violet flame. Violet colored flame. This is her flame. Try to visualize that violet color pulsating, cleansing. Doesn't actually burn you at all. It caresses you, travels through the legs and around you, because we have an aura around us, several inches around us, through the aura, up through the upper part of the body, through the neck, through the head, and up above the head, 30 or 40 feet, if you like, above the head. And so now you're enclosed in a violet-colored flame. And this is cleansing and purifying and preparing you to be a channel. So let that purify you for a few moments. You can actually start to see this in your mind's eye, this violet color. You start by imagining it, and then you make contact with the fact that it's a real energy, and you can actually see it. See this color coming up through and above you. Some of it can even smell this color. I haven't done that. Can be done. Now, bring down the white light, as I mentioned earlier. Bring this down from above the head, down through the head, the neck, the shoulders, and raise the hands, as I'm doing now, with the palms facing forwards and through the arms, through the palms. And we're going to now send energy to the world for planetary healing. And we're going to make a mental request. And if you are comfortable with this, I shall say a universal prayer as an invocation for this energy. Now, you don't have to do that. You can just visualize it. So that's your choice. But for those who wish to join in with this mentally, I shall say a prayer for world healing. Divine Spirit of all creation, we request your energy to flow out through us now to this world, to the peoples of our planet, wherever they may be, to lift them up. To those in need of healing, we ask this energy may now flow in abundance. And we turn our attention now to the conflict now raging in Ukraine. And we visualize peace, harmony, freedom, and healing there too, as this energy now flows out through us, brilliant white light through the palms of the hands and also through the heart center, where the breastbone meets in the center, but through the center in the aura, a few inches in front of the body. Visualize this white light now flowing outwards from these 3 points, the palms of the hands and the heart chakra. Just allow this to flow. Don't force it, but let it flow for a few moments out to the world as a whole. Now, when you've done that, I'll ask you to put the right palm now just above the navel in the stomach area and the left palm on top. And charge yourself up now. Now, this is a balancing practice, no longer for the global healing. This is for yourself personally. And just visualize this energy flowing into you, down through your arms, through your palms, into the solar plexus center, your battery center. And if you have a particular ailment anywhere in your body right now, visualize that area being filled with white light. And feel the same love that you felt for the world as a whole. Now direct this to your own ailment, this compassion, and allow the energy to flow. And then just to complete this very short exercise, put one palm on top of the other one, like I'm doing here now on the screen, and rub it across as a sealing mudra, as they say in Tibet. And this stops the flow of energy. So you don't want it just flowing out of control. So control is crucial in all development.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. You can extend that. I did a very, very short version, but obviously you can do that for a long time. I'd like to mention, if I may, a website. If you want to join in with online services that are going on every day somewhere in the world, if they go to the website of the society, the Aetherius Society, which is aetherius.org, they'll find details of the services we're doing every day. And also we do online services of a practice called the 12 Blessings. So that's a thing I strongly recommend, the 12 Blessings. But I am interested, someone's just come up with a comment. Thank you. That's Vinita Santoshi. Wonderful, body is tingling and my crown is still tingling. Beautiful. This is exactly what will happen, actually. That's a very good description. And you often get that tingling right on the top of the head there. So yeah, please do share your comments, your experiences, because as I said, this is based on, not on faith and belief so much as experience.
Yes.
Sorry, Lauren, I'm talking too much.
No, it's beautiful. The experience becomes our truth when we can experience it. Terry mentioned earlier that she's on a mission for peace, and this has been a very helpful conversation.
Oh,
and
good.
I just want to reiterate the power of not being a victim in our world. And if we choose to peek into the news, to keep tabs on the news, if we choose to do that, we can take a powerful stance in healing what needs to be healed.
Yes.
And so that's what I like to say. Read between the lines in the newspaper to see where new earth is coming, where changes are coming, where there is inspiration, and we can be that inspiration for the planet.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a call from someone not quite recently who suffers from depression. And they suffer from depression because they really care about what's going on in the world. And, you know, it's quite understandable. And they told me, this woman told me that she, you know, reads the news and she just can't bear it. So I said to her, look, she said, what should she do? You know, should she look at the news? What should she do? I said, well, there's one thing you can try. Just try this. When you read some terrible news about wherever it is, let's just say it's the Middle East, just throw something out, and it depresses you, it shows you care, it shows you're a decent human being, that you feel that way. What you can do is this: switch the television off, or put the paper down, whatever it is, or the internet off, whatever, and do what we just did. Raise your hands up. Say a prayer or visualize or make an intention, a demand if you like, and send the energy out for peace in the Middle East, if it's the Middle East, or wherever, whatever other area it might be. There's people suffering in Sudan. There's so many situations one could name, Yemen and so on. Send out energy in the way we did, visualizing a positive visualization, visualizing healing, visualizing peace, and do it for 5 minutes. And then do that sealing mudra that we did, and then see whether you can cope better with it all. Actually, apart from the fact you'll have helped, you think, right, well, I've done something. I haven't just got depressed, and it's that I'm not in any way diminishing that. It's a quite understandable thing, but you've actually taken some action, and see whether that helps you, as it were, to detach more, because there's nothing else you can do. You've done what you can do. And then if it happens again, send some more energy. And this person told me that's really helping. So quite apart from the fact you're helping the world, it can be helpful if you're a caring, decent person, helpful to you. If you have a relative, if your mother has got Alzheimer's, or your father's in a home, you can't visit him and you're really worried about him, likewise, send some energy, send some healing energy. That's something you can, as well as whatever else you're doing, phoning him up or whatever, you can do that. And I think it's a very healing thing, as well as it's the road to enlightenment. Service is the road to enlightenment. Yes. Self-development, it comes along, you need it, but it's not the path anymore. The path is a path of service. And because these energies are coursing through you and through the heart center and the higher centers, the energies will be drawn upwards. The force of Kundalini that we haven't yet mentioned, that will be drawn upwards. And so you'll become a more enlightened person. It's a kind of a win-win spiritual solution for the world and for you.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing on that. And it is, again, very empowering. And I've heard spiritual teachers even corroborate what you just said, even for next year, as we're here on the precipice of a new year, is that service is a requirement of ascension. And what a beautiful way to be in service, running the energy, spiritual energy, tuning into it, using it for ourselves, but using it for all those who need it.
Yeah,
when
well, Dr. King,
on a chemtrail, we can see it change.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. No, what I was going to say is that anyone who has experiences doing this, we'd love to hear from them at the Spiritual Freedom Show as well, which you can find. Where do you find that? Spiritual Freedom at richardlawrence.co.uk. Just look at my notes. Darren kindly writes for me or prepares for me. So, we like that because we will share those experiences with other listeners on various networks as well. And we'll mention, your quantum conversations where they came across it. And so please do feel free to share those with us. But coming to your point, Dr. King used to say there's only one crisis on Earth. There aren't two crises, there's one. And it's the spiritual energy crisis. And if you're a worker in the light, you're one of the people who's helping to solve the only crisis on Earth.
Thank you, everyone, for working as spiritual, wow, do I even dare say warriors? Yes, you are spiritual folks, and your light matters. And we're so appreciative of that, and for you joining us today. And Richard Lawrence, thank you so much. As we say goodbye, I'm going to put one more time in our chat line. And for those who are watching this elsewhere, you can see on this webpage, there's a special offer link, and it's to the class. This was a 2-hour class that's recorded in video with the practical tools that we've been discussing. It goes even deeper into the tools that we can experience in our life, in this live setting, that people shared what they witnessed. And we can walk away from this course empowered and using these tools to make our lives better and the lives of others and the planet. Is there anything you'd like to share about that class?
Yes, I would actually. What I'd like to do is invite people to take that class, because I will be amazed, and you can hold me to this, if you don't have an experience during that class. If you haven't had one before, and we can see from the comments that many people are having them anyway, but in that class you'll have more, and you'll have something definite, and that is your bedrock, really, like it was for me all those years ago when I tried this and I knew it worked. And you can tell the difference, as I say, between the tingling that we heard from one of our commentators there. That's a definite sensation. It's very different from, say, having an itch or a physical thing, and you can tell the difference, and then and then you're not, this is just really, as the old yogis used to say, these signs are given to help you along the way. They're not a destination, but you've got something to draw into. Okay, this isn't just my imagination. It's not just a theory. And I think if you do that class, we do various things, including looking into the future, your near future, and how you can improve your near future. There's lots of different aspects on the class, but when you do it, you will see that this is something real, and it's not somebody's theory. And whether other people believe you isn't really your problem. It's theirs if they don't believe you, and you can help them, but you will know, and then you can build from that. So yeah, I would warmly invite people, and as I say, warmly invite people to, if you have questions or anything you want to ask me as a result of that class, then please always feel free to do so. I'm at my website, richardlawrence.co.uk.
Yes, beautiful. And I want to say the value of that class, we've got it at $33, a very sacred number, and it's so valuable because this brings online our true healing abilities. And you've helped define spiritual energy healing, and what that truly means to become a healer. And we can all do it. We are probably all doing it and just not aware of it. So thank you, everyone, for your bright light and your love on this planet.
The lovely comments. I've got to say, you've got wonderful people. Yes.
Beautiful. Yes, Christy says this was exactly what I needed today. Thank you, Loren, Richard, and everyone else who brought your energy. There's something about the group energy as well that amplifies the energy. And
Absolutely.
So we could feel that. I could feel that. So
could I.
Everyone, for your beautiful comments. And Susan, Susan says, I was told I'm an old spirit, but only using my intuition at 18%. Okay, well, game on then. Game on, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Deb, Vanita, all these, Linda, thank you. Doug, Terry, beautiful. We're so grateful that you were all here. And we leave you in this place of empowerment. And we thank you for using this daily to shed beautiful light, healing spiritual energy for our planet. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Lauren.
Namaste. Thank you for listening to this quantum conversation, and thank you for dancing with us to the cosmic heart. As we raise our own vibration, we raise the vibration of the planet. This show is dedicated to you and all awakening hearts, as we are here to shine our bright light and amplify our love. Access all quantum conversations, special offers from our guests, and online healing retreats by visiting acoustichealth.com. I'm Loren Gailey, and from my sacred heart to yours, I honor your magnificent love and light. We leave you now with music from the universe. Music literally created by the universe, as musical notes were assigned to mathematical equations. The result is this beautiful music, available at acoustichealth.com. Namaste.